Kai just announced that we'll be off the air next week, that there's some appointments, and we probably have some of those also. Uh, does it come on other than that? That's true. What do you say, Derek? Well, let's see if there's a rush during the week, if there's feelings that folks would want to. Is there another way of coming on?
To for the Wednesday call.
Yeah.
Yeah, we could do another. I could do a call. It just wouldn't necessarily be on the YouTube. It would just
No,
be
that's what I'm saying. So can
yeah,
we?
yeah. I can do that.
Okay, so we'll see if we figure that out, Kai. But Kai will be creatively busy, and it is creative. I'm saying everything that you're doing has a creative element to it, and you understand that. And each time you have to go in, even to do dental work. Oh, for me now, I've again, like you, have put it off. They had this team of women that treat Mary, that just like four or five of them, you know, and immediately they pulled two teeth out and they did this
Mm.
and they said, and that I think it was almost 3 years ago. I didn't go back. 2 years. I didn't go. They said you have to do this. I didn't go back to the eye doctor for 3 years. I haven't done, So basically, yeah, they're really anxious to do work, and then to do this other work, and so it's a, but it's also goofy when you're in there. So that's what I'm saying. As I'm in these situations, I kind of understand what's happening, and I understand when Marty's describing what's happening. That the difference is that Marty is having the condition that we spoke about, that you usually treat. So it's like I saw, let's say, I saw my mother often passing away, and they say, "Well, I'm passing away. Let's see, remember how it was?" And I said, "No, no, it wasn't like that. It's, holy shit!" And I said, "It may be just like that." Where you're kind of pleasing the person, and yes, go ahead, be quiet, go to bed, or something like that. That's normally written into the circumstance. Um, and let's say you visit life, somehow you become aware that you didn't want the realizations, and you didn't want the knowing, and you wanted the experience somehow. And that somehow you had to be not strong like a fighter or something, but strong like a human being to have the experience. Because as a human being, as you come into the world and you can at least give the child innocence, you see how it has to be protected. That the innocence has to be protected because it doesn't know the schemes of the world and the trips and the this and the ups and downs and what it will do to you. But that somehow there was a purity, and somehow a relationship to you was a navigation through that form where you kept the magic still in it, but you then started to navigate and learn the languages of different situations. But that the primary was that somehow you had a conversation that was normal. Hey, baby, again. That was part of what was happening. So if you were going to be a physicist, you were going to be a hey, baby kind of physicist. You understand? That was exploring the mystery. But the mystery always had a form of a lost love. Even if it was a lost equation or a lost perspective, but it had that somehow that state was necessary to the conversation. And it couldn't be falsified. But the aspects of it give a framework. If in fact there was a scientific experiment that you were purely engaged in, where you were mixing forms and hormones and lives and structures, and it had all these other passages in it. And then all of a sudden you got a peep of humanity as not being this literal person, but somehow humanity being an aspect of a larger picture that's unfolding. And that there is, and so as you literalize it, you bring time and space into it. and it starts to think that way, and literalize that way, and plan that way. But somehow there is an attraction for this larger time and space. Like we'll say, outer space. And as you become aware that outer space is increasingly unknown, and not only that, but increasingly unimaginable. And so therefore, this idea that there is somehow an interaction consciously with outer space, when outer space is kind of parallel with you. In the present, it's imagined out there. And what you do find out there is at a certain point up in the sky, you lose the effect of gravity. So you experience something new. And so when you look at life without that feature dynamically in it, you start to see almost what would have been a mythological premise of life, that the science and the mythology and the art and they somehow interact. And so somehow when you are exploring through the art and the science and the feeling of it, and you see that what you're exploring somehow is relationship. Your relationship to God, your relationship to life, your relationship to an energy, your relationship to space, your relationship to family, all of these seem to have, as you explore any of them or are participating, if you walk past a family, that your relationship to family is simply walking past. But if you're in the family, you have a different relationship that's built into it and maybe hidden to a stranger. In fact, most of the family is hidden in terms of it's just nuanced, known. It's just like most of the activities in the body may be hidden unless something brings them out. You also see that there is a body happening in a family in some way. There is a dialogue going on. And somehow you intuit this dialogue. And you see that humanity is still trying to figure out what it is. There are books every month coming out describing what's happening. And it seems like they always have been describing what is happening. What's happening, Kai, again? Have you picked up what's happening after all these years now, Ursha? Hmm? Do you have a clue, a little bit of a clue?
I feel something inside.
Yeah.
I can't always describe, but it can be very powerful sometimes.
Well, okay, let's say, what would you believe then? Say, would you believe if they say, look, and the energy is an energy that you float with and you say, come on, please leave me alone with that. I'm 82 years old. I've been through everything here and explored it. I don't doubt it, but I don't want, please, yes, like that. And I say, why? I said, because life is heavier than the please, yes. It's not just mellow that I'm watching, and I'm seeing it as an experience. The question was, in retrospect, I'm seeing how much of my own life experience escaped me.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. But that they are in my life now, in ways that there's no law and there's no this and there's no that says what it should be, what it shouldn't be. And it seems like it should just be apparent, and yet it's not only a mystery, but it's seemingly requiring something in the person to be able to actually be there for their own life in the experience. Because you then go through all the workings of the mind and the parent, so that it tries to literalize it, it tries to own it. But what it does in the creative act, in the writing, is seeing something that somehow it can't see unless it has an experience itself. So it's not that it can't see. It does seem that there are creative dimensions hidden in life that your participation in it was to be left out of it. You understand? That the body was figuring out how to keep the person out of it so it can go about doing all the stuff that it's doing. Okay. And so it has them writing books about it and finding out about it over 3,000 years ago when the body could have told them in a minute what was going on. Okay. That they're eating too much pork or something like that. Okay. So let's say it takes 1,000 years ago to have a 1-minute conversation. But somehow the 1-minute conversation changes time and space and changes relationship to the own story that you've experienced. You see, there are holy shit moments hidden in the literal story. And somehow they have to be genuine enough or accidental enough, seemingly accidental enough, to release something that you can see. Because why? I say, without a deep release, the self catches, owns the story, possesses the hurt. And the possessors of the hurt literalizes it around an incident. When the incident exposed it, didn't create it. So then you see that there are hurts that run through the story that look like hurts as you reacted to them, but in retrospect, and it kind of has to be from nonviolence, where the being is, the desire to see one's life overwhelms every other aspect of it. And the release is there in the story. And somehow you connect with an energy running through the story and the story then. Where the story makes sense in connection to the friendship. But the story is no longer the person. Somehow with that realization that there is an energy or a being, or I can't say a you, it doesn't literalize, but that there is you independent of the story and the history. And somehow comes into the literal history through an event. And the event seems to be organized around some kind of lovemaking. Now, whether it becomes screwing, killing, raping, all those other forms, but somehow hidden in lovemaking. Now, you maybe would have met God in the beginning and said, hey, could you figure out a few other ways? Maybe wishing may be better than having to go and get boyfriends and girlfriends and have fights and arguments. Maybe there are more. And they say, no, you don't understand. You have been wishing. That was not an accidental boyfriend or girlfriend. Wishing has been the way. Once you're in it, you think it's literal. But it has been. Wishing got you into the story, and somehow wishing got you into existence. As it literalizes, because the story literalizes. But if you see the wishing and the phenomena, you don't see the literalization as being the person. You see it, you want to make it any easier. I say, okay, tomorrow I'm going to turn into a giraffe. And I say, holy shit, say tomorrow I'm a giraffe. I may have some discoveries to tell you about that after 24 hours or 48 hours of being a giraffe and just running around for a while. So you see that there is a kind of consciousness running through every one of the forms. Now, some of the consciousness looks like survival, but it also is the consciousness of carrying on something. And survival is a part of passing on in some way. So as you see it, and I was discussing before, sitting out there reading, and you see the bugs and the insects and the birds and the lack of water and the trees and everything. And you're sitting there and you just hear the language of it. And it could be like you're sitting in the mall somewhere or sitting in the park, and someone comes by, the humanity, the birds, the people, the situations, they all seem to be a grid that you're in. Where somehow you're in it but not of it. But somehow a feeling or a shared friendship or something allows you entree into the story. But the invitation to you is because there's something happening in you. And it was what? A person who could hear or could be with, or somehow you embodied a person who could be with for a moment. And when you shared a friendship, you then started to see that the pain was not a literal pain, not only reduced to your neck hurting or your back hurting, and you saw that the neck hurting was this whole confluence of events and circumstance manifested in the neck pain. So there was something in managing the neck pain, but it's like taking a drug to go to sleep, knock yourself out to go to sleep. It's not exactly sleep, but you may be so exhausted that you want that. But somehow sleep is part of a consciousness, not knocking yourself out. It's something happens in the sleep process that doesn't happen in the literal. Where if you examine it in its relaxation, it's processing a lot of things that can't be processed in its time, or it's processing its day. And that's everything from everything that's happened to it. And so you become aware of elements of it where you can't sleep or this is happening, but you see a processing. Now, was there always a processing? Of course there was always a processing, but the shedding light on the processing creates a kind of affection. And it's like someone's been taking care of you or something without you knowing it, or they've been sending checks for you, for a few years or something. And then all of a sudden you read something and there's a kind of affection. And you get a kind of affection, as dumb as it is, when somehow you see that even in the confusion and everything like that, it has been your body balancing itself out. Hmm? And that the larger world is not the only world that exists, but this attempt to bend yourself into that larger world is the only real world. When, as a matter of fact, when you have certain experiences, and that's why there is a bit of resistance with this and not going up and accepting you should get shots or you should get, it's not to do or not to do, but the one thing is that they take away your consideration in having to. So then I say, for me, my dumbness is the manana, which is not forced into anything. It's agreeing and not agreeing simultaneously. It's not agreeing to be hurried in that way. Because where it's coming from has some meaning in the life that you've lived or whatever, but it is not, there's no thing that I can associate with. Since we know everyone from the natural to the medical to every aspect of it. What do you say, Ursha? Somehow one is managing their life.
Yes.
And the management may not literally be hands-on as much as it is an awareness of something. So somehow when you were mentioning something to me last week, I said your presence is forcing it not to be controlled by its history, but that there's really something to see. But again, we come with people who think that there's something to know. Now, seeing may utilize knowing, but it can't be confined by knowing. Knowing is more a literalization of something. But when you see it and know it simultaneously, in other words, say you've worked out in the woods, in the forest, and with animals and this and that, and then you know something is happening by the fixation of the clouds and circumstance. You don't literally know it, but you're kind of deducing it from what you have experienced or whatever. So I'm saying the difference between a creative act is that belief doesn't own the story. It's still allowed to be creative. Even though the signs are pointing this way and that way, you see that it's all in flux. And you also see that the living and dying process is also one of flux. There's physical aspects of it, but even the physical aspects of it send you into certain experiences. There are certain experiences that are somehow waiting. And you then become aware somehow it's like you walk past then certain systems. You see purgatory, you see hell, purgatory, heaven, you understand? It's like you walk past it and then you see that's what he did in the book, that he was protected. And he walked past, he was in it but not of it.
You talking of Dante?
Yeah, Dante, but Dante was on a quest for his
Yes.
girlfriend, right?
Yes.
What's the name? Beatrice, delight. So somehow he went through, but he had someone take him into purgatory. He saw that everyone in purgatory makes excuses for why they're there. They blame something else, and so they can't shift out of purgatory until they see something. And then when he saw God, he saw Beatrice sitting next to God, his little girlfriend. I think she was 12 or 14 years old. He was only, at the time, that was the first love as a child they shared. You've not read all of that? I seem to remember that.
Yes, I studied the Divine Comedy.
But he saw his love on the right hand of God. And then he became aware of the whole journey, supposedly. So now the church utilized that literally. One part of the breakup with the other Christian churches were they were actually you can buy your way out of purgatory. They were starting to sell. You could buy your way out of purgatory before you got there.
Unbelievable.
So they were bringing in such a crappy way of doing it that there was a revolt where they were saying Christ could not possibly be like these, do this kind of crap and charge you and do all that. So then all these other reactions then came to the organizing of it. Then you had to sell it. And once you sold it, then you had to be able to sell the true voice. The one true voice. And then inherently, as they trying to literalize the grace into a knowable, doable, ownable thing, just like land or whatever they wanted to own the land, own it. The very ownership creates non-ownership. The very system that creates excess creates a one meal, 100 go without a meal. It has a trickle-down element that runs through the system, systemic logic, that was offset by feelings. Feelings couldn't allow you easily to survive while others starved in that way. So somehow there had to be an equation, because somehow it lived on with you, that you would realize that in the passing or whatever, that in the dreams or whatever, you would experience a loss. There was a moment waiting for you. And that would look like punishment because of their resistance. But somehow you couldn't reach your soul unless you had that experience. The soul couldn't leave the body unless it had that experience in some way, in a mythological way. Now, the Jungian Psychology also has elements of that, of parallel space. But the question is that somehow there are journeys and journeys and journeys going on in your life. And one of the journeys is almost based on intuition. As an insight into what is happening from another level, where the intuition is no longer has a conspiracy, it has a conversation with the energy. When it's in the energy, there can't be a conspiracy because the affection is too much. It's a shared experience. So as it loses the energy, one's survival becomes more important in that way. So that's why you also find if you're in the army or something, as a kid, you go in there and you find out that they built up an ego situation while you were in it and you were really dedicated and in it or whatever. But then you saw your dedication was more like falling in love. You fell in love with the idea of it as a kid or something. But once you got there, they were the creepiest, meanest, sneaky bastards that you could imagine. Even sneakier than the enemy that they were going after, they were doing the same. And somehow you saw it. It was again another weird scene. Your life was in a movie. Whatever you supposedly had to meet in real life, it was always screwed up. The movie somehow was cool. Even if it doesn't end up well, somehow there was some kind of understanding that happened. But the real life, the literalization of it, seemed one almost had to have a protective element in themselves. So as kids, I remember that we would just do prayers like Mary would come to you or Jesus would come to you. Sometimes they came uninvited and screwed things up, I guess. Yeah. Maybe saved your life. But that somehow, whatever looked like a naive energy didn't seem to have belief just as much as you're breathing. As normal as you're breathing out and breathing in. Derek, have you finished that breath book?
Yeah, I've been going back through it a little bit too, just to refresh.
Do you feel that that's the way you breathe now?
Yes.
Normally, and that it's happened normally? Yeah.
I think you had mentioned holding on the out breath, and he doesn't mention it in the book, but what that seems to have done is made me realize throughout the day when I'm holding my breath and then just take an inhale, and so I resume that sort of cadence. It's been remarkable.
Well, well, there's the Buteyko breath, and he also studied that for a long time. And the Buteyko breath thought that the mouth breathing was causing a lot of health defects. And I say, well, why? I say, because you had to then see that breathing as an exchange of oxygen and carbon mixture. When only one is happening, so when they tell you, hold your breath, it's like that, you hold your breath and you hold it in like that. What he's suggesting, no, holding, then hold it. It's an entirely different thing than holding your breath on the intake and on the outtake.
Mm-hmm.
And they say, well, then you should take your blood pressure, and you'll see the difference between your holding it on breathing out, and then you'll also understand that somehow you can't go into anxiety if you're breathing through the nose. And the rapid breathing, it's not. So there's an exchange that is happening that once you start to breathe through the nose. Now, of course, we did this in yoga, and we were doing the other things in mantras and breathing through the nose where you're conscious of it. And in fact, at one point, there was even a Russian prayer and a Greek Christian prayer done through the nose. But once I first read, I did mantras early on there, so we were breathing differently. But once I read a little bit of Buteyko, I stumbled upon it. It just made sense because there were people who had asthma and normally, and the one difference that he introduced was when you hold your breath, when you hold it on the out breath, not on the in breath. Not that you're holding air inside of you, but that you've released it. You know, that your body is overwhelmed. you, so one has been breathing that way. How long have you been doing it, Derek? Since you've done this breath book?
Yeah, I think I've also, I started practicing the breath with John. He had adapted some pranayama exercises for vocal technique. That
Yeah.
was a long time ago, but since reading the book, it's the 5.5 second cadence is new. So I've been doing that for about a year.
But that also came if you already knew, like somehow you would breathe. The real meditation wasn't actually knocking yourself out, was breathing through one nostril and out a nostril 10 times, and then the other nostril, and then 10 times through this one and out that one. So it's premised that somehow, now people do something like that anyway when they're anxious or they want to calm down. There is an automaticness to trying to calm down through the breathing. But basically, it has very much like the doing exercises, which is push down on the side of your nose and then here
Mm.
and then under your nose. And this can be tough by your lip, pinch it. And then your ears, you're just letting them hang until they fall off. And then the one that people do when their eyes hurt anyway, and that's putting,
Oh, that's a good one.
Yeah,
I like that.
just letting the weight of the head fall on the thing there. So just those moves like that supposedly restores the parasympathetic. Oh, and there's our main man. Spiro, where are you now? Are you
I'm
at
here.
home? Oh, yeah.
I'm in a room down the hall.
Okay. Down the hall.
I
Hot
just
day.
arrived.
Are you as hot out there in Colorado? Is it hot?
Oh, unbelievable.
It is hot, yeah. We are,
It's really, really hot. I mean, by now it's 90. It's
so we're okay. And how are you doing in Kai? Is it hot out there, or because we're hearing the whole country the whole world seems to be hot?
yes, the whole world.
Yeah, it's very hot summer. It's probably 90 today.
Even England.
Yeah, they're not used to it there.
No.
So okay, so you think that you've introduced that pretty much into your everyday. And can you introduce it into the music then also then, Derek? Let me see. Well, John had the condition also with the what do they call that when you can't breathe in the nighttime?
Sleep apnea.
The sleep apnea thing there. That was so that remember, and so that brought on a kind of normal anxiety sometimes in the day that would be in this situation. Now, that may have allowed you to hit a certain note. And then you would say, why? Could only Italians hit that note? And I say, no, there's a certain kind of Italian that has a hyper tenseness. And so they've created a note that usually comes from a troubadour sense. So you would say, well, why troubadour? I said, because it had a kind of hypersensual element to it, that the guy was going to die if you didn't listen to his song. He was going to kill himself if you didn't come out and say hello to him. So he brought a heaviness to the story. It wasn't just, it would be like someone knocking on your door and you say yes. And you say, I'm going to die if you don't come out and say hello to me and invite me into the house, please, I'm dying. And you say, holy, that would be heavy. A troubadour bought a circumstance of wanting to be appreciated from that central tone or something like that. It became a whole message. There is a movie called Death in Venice, is it?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Where they're hiding from the tourists in Venice that the plague is going on. So you'll hear this troubadour singing where they're laughing at the tourists, ha 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 ha, and they're singing songs at them. But the troubadour is usually envisioned as your love in a balcony and you making that connection that way. So somehow there was a hyper element that came with the breathing. And yet, no matter how much you tried to correct it, you couldn't correct it. It would be like you smoked and you were trying to correct it, but that smoking somehow gave you an insight into your artwork. Is that too weird, Spiro? That somehow you had to be coughing and being really sick before you could understand a kind of hypnosis.
The ordeal.
And they say, well, what was the ordeal? They say the hypnosis was that you were dying in a cool way. That was the underlying premise of all these characters, that dying was not a big deal to you. You were dying in the hippest way possible with the look. And I say, holy shit, the people really follow? I say, you don't know how many millions followed an idea like that. And so what we were going to, I was going to discuss earlier was the idea of selling out. Not only selling out in the literal place, like they just said, the guy, was it Ukraine, just fired 2 people that he said sold out or betrayed him to the Russians or something. So you understand that, but selling out in different situations where it's unknown what that is. But in the creative field, there would be a kind of looking at each other. And that Dylan movie that we saw the other day, what was that? Do you remember the name, Spiro?
I think it was something just like the Rolling Thunder review.
Don't Look Back. No, it wasn't Don't Look Back. Maybe the Rolling Thunder review then.
Yeah, that,
Did you see it, Derek?
I haven't seen that one actually.
Well,
Just
they had a crew of people in the background. Scorsese directed it. So that's why it's different. So it's the Rolling Thunder review is what it is.
I saw the No Direction Home. I saw that one, but
No Direction Home was the one in black and white there, wasn't it?
no, it was then 2 parts on Netflix. That was also a Scorsese, I believe.
Yeah, that I saw there was all, but was that by Scorsese also?
Hmm.
The Scorsese one had more the Godfather element to it, or not the Godfather, but the other streetwise kind of element to it. So then the people they showed were the streetwise people at the time, which were not so much then afterwards, were not so much in the story. But there was a point when Dylan converted to Judaism, then he converted to Christianity a few times, and that was in the music. I think Christianity first because he was kind of having this, there was a premise of a traveling American. There was a period called WPA, Work Project, and that meant about 32 million unemployed Americans worked on roads and travel. I think my father did paintings, so murals in buildings and schools and things like that. But then they employed unemployed people because the country was in trouble. And there was this whole socialist unionizing happening. And so I think the country was in flux. And around that period, that's folk song, I think, came out of that. Instead of God Bless America or My Country Tears or any of those, they said this land is my land. And it came out of these people, and they came out of the boondocks of Minnesota, Montana's, this or that. People who had this, didn't like the idea of them being, their freedom being ripped off. And not many of them were that violent or whatever. They were just like the same thing was happening through the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, the violence that was happening, anti-Vietnam, pro this, pro that, right wing, left wing. You see, it just took these sides. If you had the experience of Vietnam, then okay, it was no problem not being involved in Vietnam, not being the shitty scene. But if you didn't, you still had the patriotic dynamic because you didn't have the actualization. So those people who didn't have the experience, who weren't sent to a place, or the big deal with Trump that used to be laughed at was that he also had flat feet. And you know, and at the same time they were building it up. So, but that was a goof that people were actually afraid of being drafted. into the service. You had to, at 18 years old, you have to sign up and explain to them why you couldn't be drafted, actually. And I remember enlisting at a younger age and walking past that line of people. So it was compulsive, and it was that you had to do it, and then it made you into a kind of, if you were natural, you had to kind of be a liar. You had to hide. They said, they would ask you, did you sign up for the draft? And someone would ask you that, and you say, well, I'm about to go there now. So somehow they made normal a whole hidden life. And in retrospect, you find out that the hidden life was more human life, a naive life. That somehow it knew it wasn't being invited into a movie, it was being invited to a violation of its humanity. So when the question was the protection of health, you also had to see that it didn't come in the form of a dictatorship. And it's not spelled out what dictatorship is, but somehow it does have a feeling like being locked in the basement. If you have any sensitivity, and someone asking you when you're locked in the basement, what are you going to do? And they say, well, I'll probably cry tonight, and then tomorrow morning I'll be happy. And then, but it's all made up. So somehow we wouldn't do well if freedoms that we may not even have known exist all of a sudden disappear. You see how much of the human experience evaporates. There is a Butanko school there in Palo Alto. But when I look at some of the experiments online where he cures asthma, it does seem to have a good rate, where he has people walk in a circle and he has them holding the exhalation for 15, 20 seconds. Then I ran into a woman there who was on the ball, and she said 5 seconds is cool, the transition of 5 seconds. So just once you're doing it, things come your way, you know. Whether I wanted to expand again, well, I am doing certain exercises again. I may start doing neti. You know what you do neti at all? Well, there is another one that's Instapure, I think, and it's just one. It goes up the nose and then comes down. She made it. I like it better than the neti pot. The neti pot is more for pranayama actually, and it goes over the nose and out. But this other one goes up into the sinus with its salt water, and then it clears it, brings it out. The other one doesn't clear the sinus as much unless you do the breathing. So if that's applicable, I don't know how the air is out there where you are, but
it's moist out here for sure.
What they're saying everywhere, from what they're saying, most places are becoming unlivable.
Danny?
Yeah.
I just got, I volunteer for an experiment. I have a device that checks the quality of the air in my apartment. It's like a little AI. And I have a purification, what do you call that? And it's a 6 months experiment. And in 6 months, we can keep it. I mean, but the experiments goes on for 6 months. To see the quality of the air.
Hmm? And someone mentioned to me that they soon will be having a baptism vaccination. But it'll be a sniffer through the nose. It'll have dehydrated baptismal water together with a natural vaccine. And it'll be through the nose. And you can take.
Is that through the church or government?
No, this is a sneaky underground group of guys that we know. This is a sneaky underground bunch of guys that we know who they don't do this and they don't do that. They try to combine things and do it their way. So they're making a sniffer, a natural sniffer that will have baptism water. They'll find the original water that was there in St. John the Baptist. They use that as a kind of spray. What do you think? Would you use that one, Kai? I don't know about that. Would
I
you
don't
use
know.
it?
I don't know the guys. Maybe
Yeah.
maybe if I really liked them. I don't know.
We would have to really like them before we bought the story. But if you watch Last Temptation of Christ, you probably will buy the story. Once you see who St. John the Baptist is.
So they're saying they got water from St. John the Baptist?
No, they just came up with this story. How would one then, a religious person, then explain it's not a vaccination? And they say, no, it's not a vaccination. It's not puncturing anything or entering into anything. The body, okay. So they just made up this story. How would it be religious? Then they say, okay, we can get, you don't have to get St. John water. They have water in every church.
Oh, so that would make people vaccinate.
So that's what they was. So they would be more anxious to take it if, in fact, it was okay with baptism water and made with that. So then they say, look, what is the problem and what is not the problem? And I say, look, literalization. What is the problem? Is that you can't make people do things in some way. Some will do it and follow orders, and some will hide and sneak, and that seems to be always the case. And so those who think differently then have to hide in their own way how they're doing it, and then often it becomes violent, this and that, because people continue with their form. Then you say, okay, you have someone who somehow, would you feel that you're in it but not of it, spiritual? You fall guy. Be careful, fall guyville. You're gonna that's a fall.
I'm only your fall guy, mister.
Nah, get out of here. Could you believe him being a fall guy that anybody would believe?
Just for you.
No.
Just for you.
So what's your thoughts? Can it be hidden in the everyday life, some kind of secret spirituality?
Yes.
I think
people-
it's
That some
yeah,
people, even though the mass seem to just try to live and function, it seems some weird characters are always figuring out what the hell's going on and who am I and what am I and who was I? Or maybe I used to be by. And, who did I used to be? Okay. So let's say the different looks at the existence that one is living while one is living. And so you have a different look and you say, when I was that age, when I was this age, and you flash back to this experience or that experience. So you see somehow the experience in different levels of memory live on. If the memories where you're impressing something in the moment, then you can compress the experience into an expression. But if in fact it shows that 30 years ago you were a really creep rat bastard, and not only that, they have pictures of you being a creep rat bastard from 30 years ago. And it's not just an evocative experience that doesn't say, no, the literalization of flux corresponds to what? And you say, okay, there's an agency of flux, but then you also see there's a corresponding image that one is carrying. So you see life is being lived on a lot of levels. There's literal time, evocative time, there's even in the literal time around the identity, where time is confined to age, literal dates, time, born, die, that's literally you. You see the literalization of you has this story. Somehow, if you get hit by a car, you were just this normal person getting hit by a car, but then once they look in your wallet and examine who you are and were you just on a date, so then they investigate the story. You not getting hit by a car is not the story, but who you are and what you are and who it affects and what it is. And you see that you carry that with you. Somehow, who you are is not literally who you are, but once something happens to you, there's an echo effect. And someone may hear it years later or something, say, oh, I didn't know that. I thought he was still there. So somehow you see the literalization of existence. At the same time that there's literalization, that even if you haven't seen the person in years and you hear about their passing, you see it, time is compressed, shifted as normal. I say certain experiences make you aware of parallel time. And when you become aware of parallel time, somehow you enter into a kind of holiness. It may, now some may attach the holiness to it to being a costume drama, but that basically, when you investigate it, it's like you've just heard it for the first time or seen it for this first time. There's something sacred in it. You become aware that you're caring for something. Now they're trying to literalize it psychologically in the world where you are somebody and don't you worry, and you can do, and try to make this assertive character who they are. And it's having an effect in a literal sense in the world that people are being accepted that could not have been, that would have been too heavy duty 5 or 10 years ago to have had that be your reality. But then all of a sudden, elements of beauty and what is beauty and what constitutes looks and this and that is so up in the air. And it's so in flux. At the same time, there is a consciousness between groups of people of this flux and this attempt to literalize themselves as being, this is who I am. I come from this country. I come from that. I'm this. My father was that. My mother was it. So the literalization of who you are, when somehow you feel like a person is up in the air, and that your history is only one part of you, and no longer even a dominant part of you at all. It's more, the history is more like a kidding around joke. It don't have a history that dictates who you are and what you are. They're all kind. It may come in moments. It may come that the Greek takes over or something. Some element happens from. And I just saw a movie that I'll show you tonight, where it's in the town of Salonika, where it's a Greek woman falls in love with a Turkish guy. Around that time, the spiritual, supposed to be a spiritual. That space around that time in Salonika, in Turkey or Greece, there was supposed to be a migratory place where people were seeking messiahs, and war was going on, and crusades were going on, and just people in flux. And so many of them settled in that town there, and I think there was intermarriage and interaction. So many of the religions also intermarried. And they would have treks to, and I did mention that I became aware that that town somehow was in my father and my mother's background or whatever before. But then I was told somehow that my grandmother left there in 1912 for Palestine. It was nearby that something that went to Palestine was no Israel, no other place, was just supposedly the Holy Land. So I don't know what that meant, what kind of family it was, but I do know that there were wars going on. And I heard that my father was then sent to boarding schools or something like that to escape, that they just sent the kids to be saved and I had to hide them. So this is the larger story, what's going on. What's the effect? Well, it's just like the virus. What has been the effect on everyone? If they read about it later, somehow you'll see we've all been affected by this virus that has come through. Pro, con, whatever level. Somehow it's affected the elements in a way, and it shifted time. The realization, it shifted also working at home and everything. So amazingly, it shifted the idea of work. It's opened up more ideas where people just try to make a buck quick. They open up all kinds of schemes and storylines or whatever. So we are in a kind of flux where the logical system is no longer the predominant system. And that things then, even the dumbest crypto, it seems as dumb because somehow it requires an immersive of you. And I say, well, what would the immersive be? all of us agree that it's hot. And all of us on a different place. And all of us agree that it's hot. And we can give you the measurements of hot, 90 degrees, this and that, but somehow there's an agreement of what hot is when you notice it to such a point where it's interrupted the day or captured the day. I feel that the cryptocurrencies had that element in it. If you were in it, immersed in it, you kind of instinctively understood it. You may need to learn the nuances of each escapade, but basically, you got the story. But without it, you couldn't know what was happening. I was reading a little bit about the fellow that we talked about, the Dutch artist that did the red and blue lines in the chair. But then when he got to Harlem and he heard their music, he started to paint energy in the lines. Now, he didn't know fully what they were doing. He called it Broadway boogie woogie. But somehow, when they sang, there was a vibration happening in their body. And there was a vibration that he could see happening in the church. That it was, in fact, vibrating. The air was vibrating. In fact, the seats were vibrating. There was a kind of vibrational sense happening through it. And so once he experienced it, he was able to find a way of painting it, communicating it. And it changed his painting to a large degree, because then he kind of saw a life force running through it. Anything else come up? You're okay then, Urja? So now, are you still developing, maybe coming down here with?
Yes. Yes. There's, yeah.
So I think we'll practice levitation when you come down.
Yes.
And that spiral is, but not only upside down levitation. So headstand levitation is what he's been working on, and breathing.
Danny, I was telling the neighbor, do you realize I say right now, we are on a ball that's spinning on itself and spinning around the sun. She said, oh, stop it. She said, I'm feeling dizzy.
You know, Kai, your boy may like some of these books.
He doesn't like to read, but
He doesn't like to read. You know, I guess probably, well, this is probably on tape, isn't it? Or on CD or something. Does he listen to books either?
no.
Look,
But what is it? I try to get him to read one book a year.
Look, people try to get me to read also. So it's all of us. And probably you do the same. It would be hard for you to read a book anyway. If I suggested this book to you, it would be 6 months before you got it. It's like teeth, getting new teeth for dry or something.
It's more time with me. I would love to read. It's the time to sit down.
The only thing was that he was an important physicist. And he's a very practical sweetheart of a guy at the same time. So he has, so the book was, there are places in the world where rules are less important than kindness. And he has that feeling. So as you read him, and your boy said that he had kind of physics in mind at one point, didn't he? And even Wall Street and this new, even crypto have some elements of physics in mind. Physics with a philosophy.
Yeah.
But it's okay. They're far advanced already. What do you think? Is he far advanced already?
I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm just letting him do his thing. But, you know, there are requirements if we want to get a diploma, which I don't know. Is it important to get a high school diploma? I don't know, you know.
Well,
It can be helpful.
a high school diploma, yeah, I would say that's the basis or basic. Although I didn't. And why? My geometry teacher told me to put my collar down and embarrassed me in front of this girl that I left the class. So, and then a year later, I joined the Navy or something like that. So then I got my GED there in the Navy. And
Yeah,
I
it's
started-
hard because some of them require you read like 15 books a year. And to get him to read one book a year is very difficult. So
Well, that's changing a lot now, isn't it? I mean, there are so many availabilities of the books now, but the reading does interrupt. Is on the screen a lot?
all day long.
Yeah, so then the reading is a drag. Isn't it? If I ask Spiro to read this, you say, "Come on, I read it already. I looked at it, okay." They're
I
on.
read it and listened to it
I know. So basically,
in
because
the
it is like that,
bathtub.
it's pretty good. I think the breathing comes naturally once you read it or see it that way. You know. But right, once they're on the screen all the time, and everyone's seemingly on the screen all the time. So reading is extremely challenging. Even to read the newspaper through that will take me a few hours. And that's. But I am reading. I'm reading a couple of books that are pretty interesting. But the breath, then I started reading again because I only read parts of it this time and that time. But then it was again an interesting read because I'm doing most of it anyway, but it illuminated in a way. So I thought he would like that a lot. But again, you can't. It has to come accidentally by someone else, right?
He read a book that his music teacher recommended because he'll do anything his music teacher recommends.
No, then he's a pretty hip kid. But you got a
Not
pretty
me.
hip kid. So basically, I think your approach is right. That you can't lay a number on him. You see, inherently, he's going to do what he's going to do. And he's exploring that. And he somehow has permission. Why?
Yeah. That's big.
Well, he knows he has your permission from both of them.
Yes, yes, but we are going through this question of, is it important to get a high school diploma?
Depending, it's you're bringing the same view. If in fact he's to translate his movement into the world, then the high school diploma just shows that you graduated high school and you're ready to go to college. Now, they won't consider you ready to go to college if you haven't gotten at least high school under your belt, generally. Now, there are some that graduate in the 8th grade or 7th grade. They're so brilliant or whatever that there's a transition. And usually they'll have I did that, I think, in the 8th grade where you took, because we had a junior high school that had the 9th grade, but other high schools started. So there was a year and thing. So then basically I remember they took me to, there was a bunch of schools in New York that you took a test for, Performing Arts School, Brooklyn, and I took a test for that school there. And then they
Getting creds
Huh?
getting creds is the important thing. I
So
think
that
it's
was
less
the credit.
important
So
than it's
then
high
once you went
school
to
now.
Brooklyn Tech, once you went to Brooklyn Tech, then you went into architecture and science. My typing teacher saved me by telling me how to figure out certain mathematical things, that rate times equals distance or whatever. She put it, and then I saw it instantly. It was like the eye test that I just took without the glasses, where you thought you were going to run into a problem and you saw it instantly or whatever. So I understand where that probably would have, if we didn't move then to Queens, that probably would have shifted everything. Because from that school, then you have a few other schools waiting for you, or waiting for you to go through that, science schools. So basically, the schooling went the other way for me, where then I went to when I went into the Navy, then I studied there in these schools about electronics and this and that, and then on ships and stuff. So that became the education.
Yeah.
But then one was always a screw up. So that may also be that saves our life. Something saves your life from being organized into the story in that way. where it's an experience. You see that somehow you were not in it for the accolades, you were in it for the experience. They needed to measure you on the level of your experience, where they can intuit. But then they also had to make room for those people who were creatively intuitive.
Yeah.
I don't think Facebook is a college graduate. I don't think
You know, I have heard that
I don't
there
think any
are,
of those guys are college. Is Musk a college graduate?
I don't know. I have
Not
heard that there,
A lot of their workers are, but I don't think the original guys are.
Yeah, creds are a little more fluid now. I mean, you don't have to do high school per se, but whatever creds you're accruing, they help within the context.
They'll still block you out in a certain way to those people who are protecting the space. So so then probably it's in the reaction to you that you'll create a new space, and that's what the tech is allowing. That there's no literal space. That accidents, what look like accidents, may in fact reveal a whole parallel dimension that just needed to be discovered. Where discovery is the way of thinking, not so much the literalization of it. It's not as object oriented.
there are apparently colleges that are actually looking for unschoolers, is what I've heard. I haven't researched it.
I would say that's pretty true. I think that you can create your own. The only thing is he wanted to go to Stanford, right?
But I don't think that's an interesting.
Well,
He's thinking now.
I was thinking that Spiro was going to get him into Stanford.
He's thinking more of business school now, which is more because he's interested in the stock market. That could change in a year, though.
Yeah. Look, he may well, let's see where it goes. But is he okay? You're okay with him?
Yeah, I'm just worried about his teeth.
About his what?
Teeth.
I say that if he's come out of you, he'd be cool. It's a cool scene. Locked up already. May not realize it for a while. But however nuts it may seem that everything you've gone through, I could imagine coming out of a cooler scene than coming out of your scene. Even though it may seem weird and it may seem this or that. And if they say, what happened to you? And I say, well, I was in Pennsylvania and this is what happened. And they say, are you kidding me? So you see, if they try to explain what happened, you can see the moviness of it. And that somehow people have a feeling for each other that has a kind of movie feeling more than it is that they have a gun to your head or you better do this or do that. Somehow there's still a respect for feelings in some way, even though I feel that there's a whole experience. I also feel that you're free. Free doesn't mean license to run or do this. It means that basically when you no longer are in it and a feeling, it's because you no longer are in it. I think your feelings are precise, that something invites you into the space. And that seems to have been, if it's literal for you, is the making sure that the children don't come with a trip in their head, that somehow they're free to live their life, free to try their thing. Now, it may take weird for you. I say, why? I say, okay, Kaya's got a job in Wall Street now, and she's gonna. And I said, no, Kaya can't work in Wall Street.
Not me.
So let's say your son now invites you to a big party in Wall Street, and you give a talk to them.
Yeah.
That's the reason he's going to Wall Street, so that sometime you can address the whole hall of these Wall Street people. Because whatever he must be bringing some light or some beauty to the circumstance. So no matter what, I don't think he can be 100% a Wall Street. I think he's him who happens to try Wall Street, who happens to try this, who happens to try this, but he's free to try all these things. And but if he's come out of an experience with you, I feel that it's starting from a freedom. And there's a freedom to explore a world that most people can't get to or couldn't even think of or whatever. But that he can have a dream of one day or think about it one day or someone mentioned it immediately as part of a plan. So there is a kind of freedom in that. Your presence isn't reminding him of humanity in that. That somehow there's a difference what comes to you if the feeling in you is coming from that space. And it's not yours. It's just a shared experience and it's a way of sharing it. So I feel from what I've seen so far, he wouldn't be a bad billionaire. What do you think?
No, he wouldn't. He'd be good. He'd probably give money to everybody. My kids are so pure. We were taking a walk around the neighborhood one day and there were $50 and $100 bills all over somebody's yard. You would think a kid would automatically want to pick them up. They didn't even think about that. They were like, picked it up, took it up on the guy's porch, knocking on the door.
That's nice. What happened? What was it?
I'm not worried about them. I think he's an old veteran that drinks a lot, so it's hard to say what happened.
He has a stash under the bed or something like that. Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe it fell out of his pocket. I don't know.
Wow.
And they gave it back. Well, that's sweet. That's actually great.
So that made me feel pretty good.
If you like to read it, you can tell him Carlo Rovelli.
Carlo Rovelli. Okay.
The chapters are not very long.
He's a genius. He's considered genius level in terms of the world of physics and what he does. But then he's also a Buddhist, and he's this and he's that. But he also, in some pages, he puts you in the room with Einstein, having a conversation.
What's the book called?
The book is called "There Are Places in the World Where Rules Are Less Important Than Kindness." But he also has one with 7 little rules, that a small book that is very nice. But he's just a nice guy, you know. Who's reading it? Let me see. The Guardian. Neil Gaiman. He's a genius and amazing communicator. Yeah, it's always people. Even when he's talking about Einstein being in the room or this one being in the room, it's still people talking and having, just going through their life and what they're going through. So
it's about time to pick a book for the year, so I'll recommend it.
Pick a book. The book for the year I would pick for him is the book that's easiest to read. That's Breath.
Oh, he won't be interested in that.
He'll love the guy. If you look on YouTube, if he looks on YouTube and looks at the guy with Breath, he'll be the kind of guy he wants to be also, I think. What do you think, Spiro? I don't know. He seems
He's a California journalist,
Yeah, but he threw himself into Breath, didn't he?
Yeah, his book before that is really good about deep diving.
I think that you'll see, it may be just sneakily, he may just see a guy like him. And there's also a couple of guys like him that are writing about Wall Street and writing about this other stuff. Like, in other words, they're hypnotists. They also have made it here and there, but they've done it their way. Supposedly as being free people or whatever. So that's just that's a kind of freedom. What I see is happening for him is that he's creating a life for himself, creating an expression for himself. And it's kind of freedom. And there's a bit of you and there's a bit of Ram in it. Rod.
The D.
Yeah. Everyone okay there? In Pennsylvania, you're okay?
Mm-hmm.
Family's okay?
Yes.
Okay, let's hang out another week. Let's see what it brings.
So we won't be here next week. Well, I won't be here next week.
Okay. But maybe, Derek, you'll look into maybe putting something on.
I'm happy to do that.
Okay, that'll be
Thank
great.
you.
Then I'll see you tomorrow. Enjoy yourself. I'll see you when you get back. Okay, watch
I'll
out.
probably
for
see you
your-
Sunday.
How heavy is the work in your teeth, though? It's probably what I would need also.
His are concerning to me at 15. I'm concerned about his teeth. Mine are a mess, but his are for 15. I'm concerned about his teeth.
That's what you'll find in the breath book, that this whole world of changing the shape of the face through dental work and everything is also in there. He advises putting the tongue on the roof of the mouth and aligning the face. But then he also said another thing that was interesting, to put the tongue up the back and hold it there for a moment, somehow align the face. So I did find some aligning because now I have less teeth on top than on the bottom, so I would have to go like that to align. And I think that most people who've had dental work, if they really pushed, if they brought them together, you would see that there's an inch, maybe an inch and a half apart. So his premise, the other guy's premise, is that most faces are misaligned because of dental work and treatment like that, and that most breathing is also, that most people don't breathe through the nose. Most
Yeah.
people do breathe through the mouth. Now, will they claim that politics is going on because they're mouth breathers? And that's why these people want to shoot each other and kill each other because they're breathing through the mouth? Maybe. Maybe. I don't think you can do it if you're breathing through the nose.
I think eating animals is a bigger problem.
That is, the nose breather probably won't eat the animals either. Anyone that's coming there, let me see. Um, well, what do you think? What do you think, Spiro? I say, well, then that would mean almost examining everything that you're having that's made in production. So let me see, those cows don't want to give up that milk. I don't, but they didn't even know they had milk. They were just standing there. So they say, holy shit. And well, those cows give you a bad look too when you walk past them, right? And those goats, and if you've seen pigs in India when you're walking around, and even the cows, they don't even get out of your way or anything like that in the streets in India. They push you out of the way. So, and monkeys give you a hard time everywhere. So I don't know about these animals anyway. I'm going to leave them alone. And they say, well, if you have sheep cheese, I say, well, I think sheep cheese I can mind in my mind because look how sweet looking the face of the sheep is. And somebody did say, if you're going to eat cheese, have sheep cheese. Because it's the other cheeses have just been manufactured. It's like the wheat. It's no longer really wheat from 200 years ago. It's kind of this manufactured thing. So they say, okay, most of us are looking into natural eating and this and that, and somehow we have stylized an eating pattern and a living pattern to the way we're trying to live. You know, where somehow we're not making that big an imprint on existence. And you're managing your scene. Is it naive? Is it not? I say there's a difference between naive and stupid. And I say stupid means, I think that when you're now managing a duality, you're having the high part of your life. The one thing that we're attempting to create is no longer having to suppress part of our life. There's a difference between it being intimate, then it has to be sneaky. The element of creating in the social fabric sneakiness over what would have been normal, but it doesn't fit in the pattern of expression. I feel that there's a parallel expression that's happening that's as real. And I think most of us have made a life around it. And so it has its own elements in it. So when we were talking about something called selling out, that was always there somehow in the lifestyles that we've lived. And it was never so spelled out, but somehow it was there in the art world. It was there that you didn't paint to make money. You didn't do it to make money alone or something, even though you may have needed money that somehow you have to balance that out. So let's say it takes its own shape over time. Selling out doesn't mean that much at this point in time. It's normal. You can announce who you are and what you are. But the selling out was never really selling out. It was a nuance in yourself. And somehow it had to be with what Sheila said, somehow, you make love when you're in love. Everything else is weird. And it's laughable or fightable or killable or whatever they all look. Because you make love when you're in love. What does that mean? That somehow the feeling allows you an entree into a situation. Hmm? And I say, okay, then what happens? But then as you survive in the world, then it literalizes as a survival. But it's not only literal survival. You are also caring for something by your presence. And somehow that, I feel that presence allows you to know you cannot do complete bullshit with a straight face. Is that okay, Spiro? That somehow it won't let you do complete bullshit with a straight face. You have to crack up laughing. Now imagine where you would have to do that. What would be the worst challenge in the world where you had to have an honest conversation with someone and it was impossible? Because it wasn't a literally honest conversation. It meant that people were in a similar feeling. So the same an honest, heartfelt conversation didn't mean literally. It meant that somehow it was almost as if you were lying in bed together and talking and you had a heartfelt conversation just because there was an exchange that was happening there. So heartfelt meant heartfelt. That it was in that feeling that something was available to you that would be considered naive or off from the literal point of view. Because it's not around the literalness of survival. It's around the evocativeness of life. And that's why the momentary love affair has you feeling a certain way that allows you an insight into your science. And it's not a possessive then. You see that you're in the science that you've been exploring is inherently happening. So, you okay, Kai? I'll see you maybe Sunday. When do you get your teeth? Next week?
Mine are August 10th.
Yeah, I've got something in August that's coming after me.
Me too.
Yeah. And you're coming down here at that time? Hmm?
Beginning of August.
Beginning of August. Okay, let's see where
Like
we
in 10 days or 12 days.
are. Okay.
Wow.
Hmm?
Holy shit.
Holy shit is good.
Yes.
Are we watching anything, Spiro? Well, we watched that Rolling Thunder review yesterday. It wasn't bad. And the and then there's
Yeah,
some
so
guy
people,
who was that guy who gives advice? Nathan for you?
oh
Yeah,
yeah,
a guy called Nathan for you where he gives advice to people. He moves right in on them. Or he tells them how to do better business and stuff like that. And how to change their business. How to beat Best Buy. He said, look, he said you can rob all the coupons from Best Buy. And then you can go in there and buy a bunch of televisions for $1 each and then sell them for $150. So he was showing people how to cheat Best Buy and so on the show. They're so weird. They're so weird what's going on.
Yeah.
Okay, namaste, we'll say.
Namaste. Thank
I'll
you.
see you soon.
Thank you.
Hope this was okay, just this kind of
Very sweet.
flux kind of conversation.
Wonderful.
But it's
Yes.
trying to take into account the everyday stuff at the same time, the larger picture.
Yes.
I'll see you.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thanks, Danny.
Bye, everybody. Bye.